When my wife Rachel looked me in the eyes and announced she'd be letting her secret lover spend the night in our home, she thought she was humiliating me. What she didn't know was I'd already uncovered every dirty secret about them both, and by morning, their lives would be in ruins. Rachel and I had been together for over 12 years. We met back in college in Austin, and at first, she was everything I thought I'd ever wanted: driven, quick to laugh, the kind of woman who could walk into any room and instantly be the center of it. For a long time, I believed we had something unbreakable. But it turned out nothing is ever as solid as you think. Over the past half year, I noticed changes. Subtle at first, an extra hour here or there when she said she was working late, her phone always face down on the table, a sudden, obsessive commitment to the gym. At night, she'd roll away from me and pretend to be asleep when I tried to hold her. I didn't want to see it. I told myself she was stressed, that maybe I was the problem. But deep down, I already knew. You don't spend over a decade with someone without learning what it looks like when they've decided you're no longer enough. I decided if she was going to betray me, I wouldn't let her do it behind my back. I started keeping notes. Nothing dramatic, just tracking where she claimed she was and what time she came home. Every time she lied about a late meeting, I logged it. When she worked out at 9 at night, I marked the hours. I paid attention to how she smiled at her phone, how she locked it the instant she realized I was watching. Then one Friday, I confirmed what I'd suspected all along. She left the house at 7, claiming she was heading to a networking event. An hour later, I drove past the restaurant she said she'd be at. The place was dark, closed for renovations. I parked a few blocks away and waited. 3 hours later, her car appeared, pulling into a side street. A man got out of the passenger seat. He kissed her. She kissed him back like she'd been starved for it. I didn't confront her. I didn't charge over and shout accusations. Instead, I took a single photo with my phone and drove home. That was the moment something in me settled. Not rage, just a kind of cold clarity. If she was going to burn everything we built, then I would make sure she understood exactly what that meant. Over the next month, I prepared. I didn't leave anything to chance. I installed discreet security cameras in the living room and entryway. I placed a recorder inside the drawer where she kept her charger. Every time she left to meet him, I gathered more proof. I researched her lover, a man named Trevor. I found his social media. His name wasn't hard to trace to a court filing for bankruptcy. Another search revealed a string of aliases he'd used to start businesses that all collapsed in fraud investigations. Still, Rachel kept lying to my face. She'd walk through the door late, acting tired, giving me a peck on the cheek as if nothing was different. If anything, she seemed almost smug. Like she was waiting for me to snap, to give her a reason to cast herself as the victim in the story she was writing. I refused to give her that. The night everything finally came to a head started like any other. I was sitting at the kitchen table reviewing an email from our accountant when she walked in carrying a bottle of wine. She didn't bother with pleasantries. She set the bottle down and leaned on the counter, watching me with a faint smirk. "We need to talk," she said, her tone flat. I didn't look up right away. I clicked the email closed and folded my laptop. Only then did I meet her eyes. "About?" I asked. Her mouth tightened. I could tell she expected me to panic already. "I'm tired of sneaking around," she began. "I've been seeing Trevor for a while now. And I'm not going to keep pretending it's temporary. He's part of my life." She paused, waiting for me to explode. I didn't. "So," she continued, "sometimes he'll be staying over. You can either be an adult about it or whatever you feel you need to do." My fingers curled against the table's edge. The way she spoke, like she was negotiating chores, not dismantling a marriage, made something go still inside me. "You're serious," I said. She nodded, her smirk widening. "Dead serious." I studied her for a moment. She thought she'd won. She believed that by saying this out loud, she'd corner me into some messy confrontation. That I'd plead or scream or threaten to leave. But I'd already made my choice. I let out a slow breath, then lifted my coffee mug to my lips. "I hope you're sure about him," I said evenly. "Because he won't be much use to you once this is over." She tilted her head, the smirk flickering. "What's that supposed to mean?" I set the mug down and stood up, feeling calm in a way that surprised even me. "You'll find out," I said. "Soon." She opened her mouth to reply, but I didn't wait to hear it. I walked past her, my heart steady. She didn't realize it yet, but the clock had just started ticking on the last normal night she'd ever have. Rachel didn't follow me when I left the kitchen that night. I heard her pour another glass of wine, probably convincing herself I was bluffing. She always underestimated me. In our marriage, she was the one who called the shots. She managed the social plans, the budget, the stories we told people about who we were. But she never imagined I'd be capable of laying my own plans in silence. When I closed her bedroom door, I didn't lie awake agonizing. I felt something close to relief. The pretending was over. I was free to act. The next morning, Rachel was already gone when I came downstairs. Her car was missing from the driveway. I didn't need to guess where she'd spent the night. While she was with Trevor, I started putting the final pieces in place. I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my lawyer. We'd already discussed what would happen if this day came. He confirmed the paperwork was ready. Divorce petition, financial disclosures, a copy of our prenuptial agreement, all waiting for my signature. The second call was to a private investigator I'd hired weeks ago. He'd been collecting evidence of Rachel's affair and Trevor's criminal background. He'd done excellent work, far more thorough than any online search I could manage alone. Anything new? I asked. The investigator paused. Actually, yes. Trevor's financial situation is worse than we thought. He's 2 months behind on rent. The fraud charges from his failed businesses are still pending. And there's something else. I waited. He's been using a dating app to meet other women. Even while he's been seeing your wife. He's not exclusive with her. I almost laughed. The irony was too perfect. Send me everything you have, I said. Today. I'll courier it over within the hour. The third call I made was to a contact in the district attorney's office. I didn't give details, only confirmed that I had evidence of ongoing fraud and identity theft that would be of interest. The woman on the other end of the line sounded intrigued but cautious. Mr. Carver, are you prepared to submit all documentation formally? She asked. Absolutely, I told her. After I hung up, I checked my email. A folder of documents arrived minutes later, bank statements, screenshots of messages between Rachel and Trevor, copies of Trevor's old court filings. Each file was neatly labeled and timestamped. I went through them one by one. There was no anger anymore, just focus. Every lie, every stolen dollar, every insult she'd thought I was too blind to notice was right there in black and white. By the time Rachel came home that evening, everything was ready. She didn't bother sneaking in. She walked through the door, set her purse on the counter, and looked at me expectantly, almost daring me to question where she'd been. Big night? I asked. My voice was calm, even casual. She shrugged. You'll have to get used to it. This is how it's going to be now. I nodded like I was considering her proposal. Inside, I was counting down the hours until it all unraveled. Later that night, she showered and went to bed early. I waited another hour, then slipped downstairs to my office. I sent the files to the district attorney's office. Attached a signed affidavit stating I'd personally verified the evidence. I copied my lawyer. I copied the private investigator. At the end of the email, I included one final note. Trevor Mason is currently staying overnight at my residence without my consent. I am concerned he may be attempting to access shared financial accounts. I hit send. It was almost midnight when I walked back upstairs. Rachel was asleep. I lay down next to her and felt an unexpected sense of calm. For the first time in months, I didn't feel powerless. In the morning, she was up early, moving around the kitchen with forced cheerfulness. She poured coffee and hummed to herself, pretending she didn't see the divorce papers in my hand when I came in. What's that? She asked eventually, her voice careful. Something you'll want to read, I told her. She hesitated, then reached for the folder. As she flipped through the documents, her face went blank. This is a joke, she said. You can't possibly think you'll get away with this. I raised an eyebrow. With what? Filing for divorce? Enforcing our prenup? It's all legal, Rachel. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, she didn't seem sure of herself. You think Trevor is going to save you? I asked quietly. Do you even know who he really is? She glared at me, refusing to answer. I pulled out a printed report, Trevor's criminal history, financial records, evidence of his other affairs, and laid it on the table between us. Take a good look, I said. She scanned the first page, her hand trembling. You're bluffing, she whispered. Am I? Her eyes flicked over the documents. I watched the realization sink in. I'm going to work, she said abruptly, grabbing her purse. Sure, I said. Be my guest. The moment she walked out the door, I called my contact in the district attorney's office to confirm they'd received my submission. We have everything, she said. You'll be hearing from us soon. I hung up and exhaled. For weeks, I'd felt like a man trapped underwater, unable to breathe. Now I felt a weight lifting. That afternoon, I moved half of the remaining joint funds into my personal account. perfectly legal under the terms of our prenup. Rachel would notice eventually, but by then it wouldn't matter. When she returned that evening, she looked tired and wary. She didn't say a word. We moved around each other like strangers. She had no idea that by this time tomorrow, the police would be at our door. And Trevor? He'd be right there beside her when it happened. The night everything came to a head was a Tuesday. Rachel claimed she'd be home late again. But this time, she didn't bother inventing an excuse. She just texted, "I'll be back later. Don't wait up." I didn't reply. She probably read that silence as surrender. Around 8 p.m., I went through my final checklist. The cameras were online, audio recorders active, and my phone notifications were set to alert me the moment the front door opened. I didn't have to wait long. At 8:46, the motion alert flashed on my phone. I pulled up the live feed. Trevor strolled into the living room, carrying a bottle of cheap champagne. Rachel followed him, grinning, her hand brushing his back. They spoke in low voices. I didn't care what they were saying. I'd already gathered everything I needed to prove this wasn't just a fling. It was a deliberate violation of our marriage contract and the final push I needed for the courts to fast-track the divorce. They settled onto the couch, popping the cork and toasting each other. Rachel leaned against him, laughing at something he whispered. I felt nothing. No sadness, no jealousy. Just an unshakable certainty that I was doing exactly what had to be done. At 9:02, I sent a final email to the district attorney's office. Attached was the real-time footage from the cameras, along with a statement affirming that Trevor was trespassing in my home without my consent. 5 minutes later, I received a single-line reply, "We're dispatching units now." I stayed seated, phone in hand, watching the feed. Rachel and Trevor were still on the couch, oblivious. She tilted her head back against the cushions, and he kissed her neck. A second motion alert pinged my screen, movement on the front porch, then a series of sharp knocks. Rachel sat up, startled. Trevor froze, his hand halfway to her shoulder. The knocking came again, louder. A voice called out, "Austin PD. Open the door." On the camera, I watched Rachel's expression collapse from confusion to panic. She looked at Trevor, who shook his head as if he didn't understand. Another knock, more forceful this time. Trevor stood, moving toward the door, but Rachel grabbed his arm. They argued, voices rising. He yanked away and disappeared from the frame. I heard the door open, and then a chorus of commands. "Police! Step back! Hands where we can see them!" The feed jerked as officers surged inside. Rachel stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the coffee table. Trevor's arms shot into the air. The lead officer pointed at Trevor. "Trevor Mason, you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft." He tried to speak, but the officer interrupted him, reciting Miranda rights in a steady, practiced tone. Rachel turned, her gaze darting around the room as if she could somehow escape the moment. She caught sight of the camera, her mouth opening in silent realization. I stood up from my chair and walked calmly downstairs. When I stepped into the living room, the entire scene went silent. Rachel looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. Trevor gaped, too stunned to form words. "You," she breathed, her voice cracking. "Me," I said evenly. The officers barely glanced at me. One of them tightened the cuffs on Trevor's wrists. "What the hell is this?" Trevor spat. "This," I said, nodding toward the officer, "is called accountability." Rachel's hands curled into fists. "You set this up," she said. I met her eyes without flinching. "I didn't set up anything that wasn't already true. You brought him into this house. You made your choices." She turned to the officer nearest her. "You can't arrest him here," she insisted. "This is a private matter." The officer shook his head. "Ma'am, we have evidence of multiple felonies. Your husband is the reporting party." Trevor tried one last time to twist free, but two officers forced him to his knees and guided him out the door. Rachel watched, her mouth working soundlessly. She looked back at me, and for the first time since this all began, I saw fear instead of contempt. "You think this is over?" she demanded. You think you've won? I didn't answer. One of the officers handed me a copy of the arrest warrant for my records. I thanked him. After they left, Rachel and I stood alone in the wreckage of her plans. She started to say something. Another justification, another excuse, but I raised a hand to stop her. You wanted a new life, I said quietly. This is part of it. Her chest heaved. You can't do this to me, she whispered. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so she'd have no choice but to hear every word. I didn't do anything to you, I said. You did this to yourself. She shook her head, blinking fast. I'll fix it, she said, almost to herself. I'll get him a lawyer. He'll be out on bail in no time. I didn't bother arguing. She was clinging to denial because it was the only thing left. You might want to check your email, I told her. She frowned, confused. Why? I turned to leave. Because by now, I said over my shoulder, everyone knows. I walked upstairs, leaving her in the living room, clutching her phone. A minute later, I heard the first strangled sob when she saw what I'd sent. Screenshots of her affair, records of Trevor's crimes, and a copy of her own emails to him, forwarded to her boss, her parents, and half the people we knew. I lay down on the bed and closed my eyes. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace. Rachel didn't sleep that night. I could hear her moving from room to room downstairs, her footsteps quick and uneven, her voice occasionally rising in a whisper as she made call after call. I didn't need to wonder who she was dialing. Trevor's number, her best friend, her mother, anyone who might reassure her this could be fixed. None of them answered. By morning, the fallout had already begun. When I came downstairs around 7 a.m., she was sitting at the dining table, clutching her phone like it was the last lifeline she had left. Her eyes flicked up, searching my face for something. Pity, maybe, or an invitation to talk. She didn't find either. Adam, she started, her voice ragged. You can't just send this to everyone. This is my career. I walked past her and poured myself coffee. Your career was built on the image you sold everyone, I said calmly. Now they know who you really are. She shook her head, breathing fast. Trevor is going to get out, she insisted. He'll explain this was all exaggerated. Once people hear, he's not getting out, I interrupted. I've already spoken to the district attorney's office this morning. His bail hearing was denied. He's considered a flight risk. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. You should focus on your own problems, I added. Your boss saw everything. You might want to check your email. Her fingers fumbled over the screen. She opened her inbox and scrolled, her shoulders hunching as she read the messages, a formal notice from her employer placing her on unpaid leave pending an ethics investigation. A statement that her presence was no longer compatible with the company's values. She set the phone down with a shaking hand. You think you've ruined me, she said quietly, almost like she was talking to herself. You think I'm just going to accept this? I looked at her steadily. You don't have to accept anything, I said. But you will live with it. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't pick it up. Who else did you send it to? She asked, her voice hoarse. Everyone who deserved to know, I replied. Your parents. Our friends. The people who thought we were a happy couple. She drew in a sharp breath. They'll never forgive you, she hissed. I shrugged. I'm not the one who lied to them. The rest of the morning passed in silence. She retreated to the guest room and shut the door. I spent the time calling my lawyer to finalize the details. The divorce petition was filed at the county clerk's office by noon. The prenup we'd signed years earlier, at her insistence, ironically ensured she had no claim to the house or my personal savings. By afternoon, the first messages from her family started coming in. I knew because she emerged once to accuse me of twisting everything. Her mother had called her in tears, demanding to know if she'd really brought a criminal into our home. Her father, more blunt, had left a voicemail cutting off financial support until you get your life together. She threw her phone onto the couch, her hands balling into fists. This is your fault, she shouted. You did this. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Late that night, when I was upstairs reading over the finalized financial statements, she knocked on the door. Her voice was thin and uncertain. Adam, she called, we need to talk. I ignored her. The knocking continued, harder this time. Please. Just 5 minutes. I set down the papers, walked over, and opened the door a few inches. Her eyes were red. She looked smaller somehow, like the fight had finally drained out of her. "What do you want?" I asked. "I made mistakes," she whispered. "I was stupid. But you can't just leave me like this. I don't have anywhere to go. No money. No, you made sure of that," I said flatly. "I'm still your wife," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. "You can't just abandon me." "I'm not abandoning you," I corrected. "I'm letting you face the consequences of your choices." She reached for the edge of the door as if to pull it open wider, but I blocked it with my hand. "You have 30 days to vacate," I reminded her. "You signed that agreement, Rachel. You don't get to stay here." Her face crumpled. "Please," she said again. "I'll lose everything." I met her eyes one last time. "You already did," I said. Then I closed the door. The rest of the week played out like a slow-motion collapse. Word of the scandal spread further. Her colleagues cut contact. Friends she'd counted on stopped replying to her messages. Even her yoga instructor, someone she'd once bragged about being so close to, sent a polite text telling her not to come back to class. On Thursday, a process server arrived with the final divorce documents and a formal notice that her access to our joint accounts had been revoked. I watched through the front window as she took the envelope, her shoulders sagging. That evening, she tried once more to get through to me. She cornered me by the garage as I was unloading groceries. "Just listen," she pleaded. "I know you're angry, but you've made your point." "I'm sorry. I swear I'll never see him again." I set the bags down and studied her. "This was never about just him," I said. "It was about the way you treated me. Like I was stupid. Like you were entitled to more." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Can't we fix it?" she whispered. "No," I said. She didn't follow me back into the house. After I closed the door, I heard her car start up and pull away. That was the last night she tried to talk to me face to face. The day Rachel officially became my ex-wife was overcast and quiet. I signed the final divorce papers in my lawyer's office on a Tuesday morning. It didn't feel triumphant. It didn't feel sad. Mostly, it felt like taking off a heavy coat I hadn't realized I was still wearing. My lawyer slid the finalized documents across the polished desk. "Congratulations," he said evenly. "It's done." I nodded, thanked him, and walked out into the parking lot. Meanwhile, Rachel was living in a rented room on the edge of town. She called me twice that week, once to beg for help paying her security deposit, once to say she'd been fired permanently. I didn't pick up either time. By then, nearly everyone knew what had happened. Her old friends stopped answering her calls. Her family, embarrassed and tired, told her she'd have to figure it out alone. I didn't feel responsible for that. She'd built the fire herself. 3 days later, she showed up at my door. It was a Saturday morning, and I was cleaning out the last of her things, boxes of books, a few kitchen items she'd left behind. When I heard the knock, I already knew it was her. She looked smaller somehow. Her hair was unwashed, her posture slumped. She didn't try to pretend she was okay. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. "No," I said. She stood there for a moment, staring past me like she couldn't believe it had come to this. "I don't have anywhere else," she whispered. "Trevor's gone. He won't return my calls. My parents won't let me stay with them. My credit is destroyed. I don't even have enough to cover next month's rent." "I know," I said calmly. She blinked, swallowing. "I made mistakes," she said, her voice shaking. "But I'm still the person you loved." I looked at her without flinching. "No," I said. "You're not." She wiped her cheek with her hand and tried again. "I'm sorry," she said, almost in a whisper. "I was stupid. Selfish. But you don't have to keep punishing me." "I'm not punishing you," I replied. "This is what happens when you destroy trust. There's nothing left." She took a shaky breath. "I don't know what I'm going to do," she admitted. "I have nothing." I thought about all the nights she'd stayed out, all the times she'd looked me in the eye and lied, the months she'd spent convinced she was smarter than everyone around her. "You'll figure it out," I said. I started to close the door, but she put her hand against it. "Please," she said one last time. "Just help me this once. Alone, anything." I held her gaze so she'd know I meant every word. "No," I said. Then I shut the door. She didn't knock again. Over the next week, I received the occasional text, short, frantic messages that dwindled into silence. She must have realized there was no point in pleading anymore. As for Trevor, the legal process moved fast. With the evidence I'd turned over and his prior record, the prosecution filed multiple felony charges. He remained in custody awaiting trial. I never bothered to look up whether Rachel visited him. In the months that followed, my life slowly settled into something like normal. I went back to work, started spending time with friends I'd neglected, and remembered how it felt to have days free of anxiety. I didn't tell many people about the details of what happened. Most of them had seen enough from the messages and news articles circulating in town. Nobody asked for explanations. Nobody blamed me. Rachel faded from our shared social circles. The last I heard, she was working part-time in a neighboring county, renting a room from an acquaintance who felt sorry for her. One afternoon, about 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I got a letter. There was no return address, but I recognized her handwriting right away. I stood at the counter for a moment, considering whether to open it. Eventually, I did. It was short. A single page. Adam, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to care. I just wanted you to know I think about what I did every day. If there's any part of you that can hear this, I'm sorry. Rachel. I folded the letter once and set it aside. I felt no satisfaction, no lingering anger. Only clarity. I didn't reply. In the end, there was nothing left to say. The lesson was simple. If you take trust for granted, if you build your life on deception, eventually it all comes apart. And when it does, nobody else is responsible for the ruin but you. That was the part Rachel never understood until it was too late. I did forgive her, in my own way, not with words, but by letting go of the bitterness. I refused to let her choices define who I became after her. I never saw her again. And I didn't need to. The story was over.